Okay, so I think I'll just start out by just giving a couple updates on where we're at with the CLT development. And again, just stop me if you have questions or if you have comments too on or ideas and thoughts. Um, so one of those is thanks to Jim and his student Joseph. Worked with us this semester. We have draft bylaws that we are working through currently so that we can file for the 501c3 to establish the Indianapolis Community Land Trust, um, which again would have like a tripartite board of CLT residents once we do have CLT residents, as well as community members and public representatives. So that is moving along and we're working. And that's another update too, is we have brought on Jeff Washburn, who was formerly the executive director of the City of Lakes Community Land Trust, which I think is maybe the third largest community land trust, second or third in the country. And it's in Minneapolis, Minnesota. So he is going to be helping us as a consultant, really to help us stand up the pilot projects going into next year. So his focus right now is one, helping work through the bylaws. So we have a draft. So we're just trying to put the final touches on it so that we can get it filed with the IRS and with the Indiana Secretary of State. He's also helping us and really working with Stephanie, who's been taking kind of the lead on putting together the processes and procedures for a home buyer choice program, or sometimes called the home buyer initiated program, which is the first pilot that we're going to roll out. And Stephanie, since you're not feeling well, I'll speak a little to it. Feel free to add in unless you want to take the mic. Okay, cool. So the a home buyer choice program, and this is one that the City of Lakes, for instance, says is their most popular program, is where instead of building housing, the focus is on providing subsidy to homeowners so that they can afford to buy houses that are for sale just on the market. So any house that's down the street or wherever they want to live in the house that they think is fits their needs the most, if it's for sale for $200,000, for example, the community land trust might bring $100,000 in cash to make that home affordable to that home buyer
Nice.
family.
Wow.
So their mortgage would be for $100,000, which again, their mortgage payment would be based on that $100,000. And there might also be some, and we're working on this part too, is how to also bring some rehab assistance, whether that's to address any like health and safety or structural issues. So like lead, asbestos, um, roof, any major systems. So the idea is to try and set up the new homeowners for success so that they are not having to make any major repairs in the first 5 to 10 years. And we may also institute what's called like a repair reserve, like Houston Community Land Trust, who also does a home buyer choice, where home buyers pay in $50 along with their $50 a month ground lease fee. They pay another $50, which is really a savings, goes into a savings fund for them to that they can draw down. Like, so let's say 10 years later, they need a new roof, they can draw down that $10,000 that they have in their savings fund to help pay for it all or some of the repair that they need. And actually, we just had Aprilli join us. So Aprilli, would you like to do a quick check-in? We did how you're feeling today, 1 to 10. If your mood were a color today, what color would it be? And if you have any end of the year or holiday plans that you want to share. Aprilli, can you hear us?
Oh, hi. I didn't know that you called my name. Okay.
Oh, yeah.
Yes, I can
Hey,
hear.
good to see you.
Good to see you all. Good to see everyone. Um, so my color is gonna be like a frosted lavender. Yes. um, and my number is a 9. Because I made it to this meeting and I'm already happy about that. Happy to see y'all. And holiday plans. Mainly New Year, for the New Year, planning to drive to DC for family. So even though it's a short little break, I'm just excited about it.
Nice. Y'all get good
And
food for DC? Do y'all have what kind of family you got there?
I was born in DC actually,
Oh,
so Yeah, so I have some really close cousins there, and the city is really important to my mom and my family. So it'll be nice to see the city again.
Awesome.
It's so nice to just lay your eyes on something else sometimes. So thanks, and I will pass it on
All right.
to Beth.
Thanks, Aprilli. And actually, we
Thanks.
already did our check-in, so
Oh,
we
you
got
did.
one last to go. So, and we were just going through some updates for the CLT development. And again, just add in any questions. And again, this is a real informal conversation, so feel free to add in. So we were just talking, the first project is going to be a home buyer choice program, which again is about buying homes that are on the market already. And those could be new homes, but they could also just be existing homes too. And the goal and some of the pros of going in that direction. Again, City of Lakes CLT says it's their most popular because people get to choose. It really puts the power in the hands of the home buyers and then the CLT homeowners to choose the home and the neighborhood that best fits what their needs are and what they want to do. So that's been, and it's most like a regular home buying process because people have their own realtors, they'll qualify for a mortgage, and just kind of go through that process. Um, and there are other kind of, in terms of the environment itself, there right now, construction prices are really high, along with interest rates too. So there may be an advantage in terms of existing homes. And again, it will vary community by community. Some communities, existing homes are going to be really expensive, but some there may be more affordable options for folks. Um, uh,
Alvin, I
Can
have
I
a
ask?
couple of questions.
Yeah, go ahead. So let's go Beth and then Aprilli.
Thank you. Um, so you might have said this before and I've not kept up to speed, but I like this buyer's choice. It kind of gives you traction right away. That's exciting. Um, the question I was going to be, so um, have you defined the geographical sphere, since there's no particular land that you've invested in per se, like was started out at the beginning of concept, right? You have a geographic idea of where you're focusing on, and then the last or the next question that follows on to that, say you're a home buyer and you qualify and you get in and you're there for 10 years and you want to, maybe what was good for you at 10 years as a home that was existing, now you want to move on. How does that work with the community land trust in that instance?
Gotcha. So in terms of geography, right now we're looking at Marion County, so the boundaries of Indianapolis. And then in terms of when they want to sell their home, they'll be able to resell it based off of the original price they paid. So in that example I gave earlier, let's say they paid $100,000 for the house. They'll be able to resell it for that plus the appreciation they got. So there's a resale formula that we've selected, which is a fixed resale formula of 2% per year. So in 10 years, that's 2% times 10, 20%. So they would sell it for $120,000. So they would
Nice.
get 20,000 in equity plus also whatever they paid down in their mortgage in that time. So let's just say another like $20,000. So, and they can use that again if they want to use that as a down payment to buy a house on the market, regular market. That's an option, or they just have that cash to do with whatever they want to do, school for kids or business or just for life as they move on if they want to go back to renting or something.
Or do they have the option then to select another home in the buyer's choice, or is it
That is
one
a
and
great
done?
question. I don't see why not if they still qualify as like a CLT home buyer. And that's actually, I'll write that down too, because there might be like an incentive to say, hey, we want to keep people who want to stay in the community land trust to be able to have that option, even if like later on their income increases. Is there some way? So that's a question we'll have to look up and look into.
Thank you.
Could you share the appreciation example again of what they would start with and end up with?
Yeah, so it's 2% annually per year. So if their purchase price. So the house might be, for instance, in this example, $200,000 was the sales price on the market. The CLT provided what's called like an affordability gap. This is not, and it's different from down payment assistance. Down payment assistance goes to the home buyer and it's really money that they own then. This is really investing in the house for that person, buying it first, and then everyone else who owns it after that. So should they choose to sell it, then that investment stays with the house to make it permanently affordable so that is still a resource available to community. So in that example, they paid $100,000. That's what their mortgage is for. So in 1 year, they could sell it for $102,000. In 2 years, $104,000. So just every year, 2% of the original purchase price is added on to their max, what they can sell it for maximum.
Okay. And then that excess of appreciation from just the regular market would go back into purchasing other homes and just the nonprofit budget.
So the excess appreciation, it would just be sold to another CLT buyer. The CLT.
Oh, right. Okay. Okay. So
it's just really going to the next buyer.
That makes sense. Yep. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
And I did have another question. Are people able to like take equity off of their portion of, like, could they do a loan with a line of credit from their home equity?
Yes, they can refinance. They would just need to get the permission of the CLT. So again, that's one of the benefits, I think, of the CLT is also having another set of eyes to make sure that homeowners don't fall prey to predatory lending. So there's a lot of banks that might or financial institutions that might want to make money off of people refinancing, and then they end up losing the home because they can't afford their new payment. So again, the CLT wouldn't want to restrict people from accessing their equity because that's a really important resource people have access to. So it would just, the CLT will help make sure that it's not a predatory loan. Okay. And there's going to be, and I don't remember exactly what we decided. I think they can take up to 90% of their resale price. So whatever that is, if it's 10 years later, 120, and they've paid their mortgage down, they can take out the difference between 90% of their maximum sale price out.
Don't forget that Curly's in the queue for asking questions.
Really, let's go with your question.
Okay, I wanted to ask where are things with the application? Have the applications gone out? Have the first round of people, residents or homeowners, been selected? I just feel like so much time has passed since I was able to check in. So
yeah, so the application is not yet available, but if you go to clt.kepler.org, there is a forum on there for wanting to be involved. And one of those options is I'm interested in being a CLT homeowner. We expect to release it in the next 3 months, sometime in Q1 of 2024. So yeah, if you're on that list already, or if you sign up for that list, as soon as it's open, we'll send an email out to folks who signed up.
And if I may add, I don't know if any of you are interested in becoming residents. An important step during this time would be to pull your credit and get a feel for where that is. We'll be working likely with a mortgage lender, and it's likely that credit will need to be, probably 620 or higher for the credit score. And if it's not there yet, this is a great time to do what you can to work on it. And there are some free classes through INHP that we've linked to on our website as well. And that can help you better understand your credit. So this is a really important time to do what you can. Tax returns coming around for some of us soon too. That can be a strategic time to maybe pay down some debt. That's going to impact your credit the most to raise that. So I did want to point that out too.
Yeah, thanks, Stephanie.
I want to know, are there eligibility criteria? So who would be eligible to apply for a home through the Indianapolis CLT?
Question. And you have got to our main topic of discussion for tonight that we wanted to touch on, which is really something that we've been discussing, which up till now, we've been thinking, so a lot of affordable housing programs, they go up to, in terms of who's eligible, anyone below 80% of the area median income, which I think in Indianapolis for a single person is somewhere around like $50,000, somewhere in there. What we have been thinking about within the CLT is that we want to focus on below 60% AMI. And there's a couple reasons. One, really what we see the CLT as being able to do is take people out of rentals
Hmm.
who couldn't buy a house otherwise by providing that extra capital and giving them access to that so that they can start building. So our homeowners and we, our community, can start building equity, whereas they would just be paying money to their landlord, which doesn't build any equity. And it may even be in a situation that's very unstable. Rent's going up every year 10%, every year $100, $200. There's just not a lot of security when you're in a rental situation. And even with the conditions of the home can also not be the best. So I think in our minds, our goal, and we're kind of thinking about this now, as to, do we exclusively focus on folks below 60% of the area median income? And just as a gauge, and we can pull up a chart or something to show it, but for a single individual person, that's around $39,000 a year or less. For like a family of four, it's probably like 45 to 49, maybe in the 50s, somewhere in there, or less. So that's kind of some of our thinking. We're also thinking about, okay, do we focus? Yeah, so I'll open it up for y'all to, any thoughts? Would you make it a hard cap at 60, where really this CLT is for homeowners who make under 60% of the area median income?
I had like I know I had a follow-up question to my question, but in response to your question, like it has to do with the credit score. So like if someone is at 60%, I mean, I guess I don't have any statistics or anything on this, but I mean, I just imagine that, you know, credit could be a challenge. And I guess I wonder, could you have like some kind of balance between like the 60% and a higher credit score, or like 70%? And are you saying that you're not going above 60% at all?
That is what we're proposing, is not to go
Okay.
above, and really that again, focusing it on folks who are really locked into renting, to make sure that the resources go to folks who need it. Because I really like, even though it may not be ideal in the housing market for people who make 60 to 80% of the area median income, there are other programs that do provide housing to folks like that, like the community development corporations that develop housing. Usually those are more like 60 to 80% AMI. And there are houses that are available that people could buy there. Is it perfect in what people want? Necessarily, maybe not. But for folks who make less than 60% of the area median income, or let's just say, for to keep the jargon out, people who make less than basically $40,000, there are very few options to be able to buy a home with interest
Right.
rate.
Right. I don't question that at all. I mean, I'm also in that category. I just wanted to know if there's a way to kind of consider if someone has a low credit score, um, but their affordability in terms of being able to, I don't know if they're up to that 60% marker, or even if it were to become like 65%, um, if that would, if some combination could be taken into consideration.
Yeah, and I think what I hear you saying really is, hey, if credit score is an issue, are there alternatives that we can consider? Like,
Yeah.
and really, and that I think that is something that we will have to look at, particularly folks who are like not just at 60, folks who are at 30 or even below 30% of the area median income may not have the credit score to do that, or even necessarily the income to qualify for a conventional mortgage at the current interest rates of 6.5%. So some things that we're kind of playing around with is what Habitat for Humanity does is they make their own mortgages, which they can make their own terms. They can decide what are the qualifications, whether it's the credit score criteria, and they can make exceptions too. Like, okay, this person has shown that they've paid rent of $800 a month every month for 2 years. Confident that even though their credit score is like below 600, is 550, we believe in this person and
Yeah.
we're going to give them a shot, or we're going to buy the home like and rent it to them for a year, and if they're good and they still want to buy it, we're going to sell it to them doing our own mortgage. So we've been kind of trying to play around with some more like creative ideas, because I think at the end of the day it's really about capital. If the CLT has capital and is able to raise capital to be able to basically be the bank for these homeowners, it's going to make it way more affordable. Because if you pay 6.5% interest and you're buying $100,000 house, you're probably paying like $250,000 to $300,000 over 30 years for that house. It's just that money, that extra money, goes to the bank in the form of interest. So I think in a really logical way, if we can find a way to access capital, then it would save our home buyers and homeowners a whole lot of money, and it would make it more accessible to folks who are lower income, maybe even below 30. I don't know. Like that, these are kind of the things that we're trying to think about and be creative and think more out of the box on.
Yeah, I love that idea of like Kepra actually buying the homes and renting them out. Yeah, I like that. Gonna need some property management.
That is another factor too. Yep.
Yeah, so this wouldn't be a straight rental though. This would be home ownership, even with the ground lease, on this home buyer's choice program, right?
So yeah, with how the homebuyer choice program works for Houston, works for City of Lakes, it's home ownership. So even though they pay a $50 a month ground lease fee, they own the home, the improvements, though the CLT retains ownership of the land. And again, for those who aren't familiar, that's how the community land trust keeps it affordable. That's what allows the home to be resold. And again, the idea is people are going into this program agreeing that that's what they want to be a part of. They want to be a part of a community project that is focused on creating community and providing affordable and good housing that's stable for folks in our community. Even if they can gain some equity and move on to that. And if they want to do that, the more power to them. And if people can buy in the market normally, the more power to them. They will get a lot more return, likely a lot more return on their investment if they are able to do it that way. But for us, that's kind of what we're trying to think through. But if we did do a rental, like if we did buy a home and decide to do like a rental program where the renters have the first opportunity to purchase maybe every year when the lease is up, like and we have the capital or funding available to then make the mortgage to them, or they're able to qualify for a mortgage and buy it from the CLT. I think that could be a way that is particularly in this environment with high interest rates, like that might make sense for a lot of people. Because like there was a really good, and it was in the newsletter, the December Homes for All newsletter. It was like a story about whether it makes more sense to rent or buy right now, which really is dependent on how much you're paying for the house and how long you want to stay there. So like basically the story is like, if you want to stay there more than 10 years, like don't buy a house unless you want to stay there for like more than 10, like for at least 10 years, because of all the upfront costs, the down payment, the interest, the large amount of interest you're paying at the beginning of the mortgage. For those of you who aren't familiar with mortgages, you pay mostly your payment is interest in the first couple of years. And plus the realtor fee that you're paying too when you're buying a house.
So. That's all true, Alvin. It is very difficult to project how long you're going to be in a house when you're making those decisions. And the other thing not to discount, though, is your standard of living.
Yeah.
As it either diverges, converges, or even surmounts that break even point, if you will. I mean,
You're saying it's just for the security, even if you're staying there for a certain amount of time.
yeah, I mean, you may live a lifestyle that is your standard of living by whatever factor you measure it, but the stability of being in your own home and having say over your monthly thing. And then if for a job, for example, I mean, traditionally you could say for that maybe a job takes you elsewhere. And in hindsight, you might say, well, that was awfully expensive for that short time frame. But then you have to factor in, of course, the standard of living that you were able to realize, or the benefit rather of the standard of living that you realized. So I have one question with regard to as this buyer choice program continues and proliferates, is it a correct understanding to think that that home then, because of the investment of the funds from the community, always will be a community land trust home?
That is correct. Yeah.
Okay, that's great to know. So what about the risk that you see or not risk with that? Because you're actually letting the buyer determine where your land, excuse me, where your land investments are.
That's a good question. So the way that City of Lakes does it in Houston, there are certain criteria for the house, and it's not about aesthetics. It's not necessarily even about location. It's more about, is this the house structurally sound or is it a money pit? So there are certain criteria where they'll be like, have a veto, and they say they don't do it very often. Like City of Lakes includes rehab with their program, so they are more flexible. Houston doesn't have any rehab included. They just provide more money for the subsidy. So they have very strict criteria about, okay, that needs no major repairs to systems in 5 to 10 years. And basically the realtors that work with them and the buyers know what those are. So it will kind of, that we will have that criteria, just kind of like of a checklist of like, here, like if there are any of these red flags and we don't have refunds to address or rehab funds to address it, then we'll have to like be like, we know you love this house, but like there are like some long-term challenges that because we don't want to set people up to also fail too.
Thank you.
But we also don't want to be there like a big brother telling them what to do either. Just some very loose like guidelines. Any other thoughts or questions? And this is just really open, so the floor is open for whatever y'all want to talk about.
I think it may have cut out a little bit there at the end for me. Were you all, I heard the beginning portion, but were you all also discussing like, will there be guidelines, kind of like an HOA, almost like a rental agreement with kind of what people can do to the interior and exterior of the home and
So-
how that would impact like value?
So there will be some things like that within the ground lease, which we're finalizing by ideally like January or so. But those are more through the lens of the home buyer, not for like painting. They can do whatever they want, decorating, painting, whatever. But if there's anything that requires a permit, like, okay, I'm going to build a deck on like the back of my house, or I'm going to build an additional bedroom on the back of the house, that has to be approved by the community land trust. And there'll be some process for home buyers to submit like a request to do like a home project. And I think, and there may be certain things like Houston doesn't allow for in-ground pools because they will increase the price of the home a lot. So if they invest in like $30,000 or $40,000 to install a pool, it may negatively impact who can afford to buy the house in the next they decide to sell it. So there may be a few things like that, but mostly it's about getting approval and making sure that it doesn't make it unaffordable, basically. And they'll also get credit. It's called like a capital improvement. I think when we put together a policy with Jason Webb, which was like, if what you're doing to the house is at least 10% of your purchase price, then you can get a capital improvement credit. So that, okay, I spent $20,000 on a new roof and I sold it next year. Like, I should get some credit for the money I put into that roof on the house. They'll get some like amount of credit for when they resell it to add on to their maximum price. But again, that'll be based off of the useful life. So if they build a new roof and they sell it 30 years later, that roof doesn't have the same value as if they installed it last year. So it's just kind of balancing, like being fair to the homeowner, but also being fair to the homeowner too.
That makes sense. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you, Erin. Great question.
I have a question. Once people meet the criteria, I'm wondering like, if there are any measures and like what determines who is selected, or is it just like a majority vote between certain members? Is it only members, community in addition? And is there has there been any talk about like randomness?
Mm-hmm. So we haven't decided how we want to do it yet. And again, would love y'all's feedback. I will share that both Houston CLT and Minneapolis CLT do it first come, first serve on a first come, first serve basis. So let's say, for example, like everyone on this call qualified and went through the processes. So they did the application, they qualify, they turned in, like we all turned in our documents, like showing our pay stubs and bank statements to show, yes, we are under that 60% of the AMI. And then each of us would get, hey, this is based off your income. This is how much you're going to qualify to buy a house for. So, and really, and this is the part that we're working on right now, is what that maximum subsidy is going to be. So Stephanie has done some initial market analysis on what that should look like based off of Indianapolis. For Minneapolis, their maximum is $120,000, though their median home price is about $100,000 more than Indianapolis. In Houston, their maximum subsidy is $150,000. So we suspect ours will be somewhere in that ballpark of 100 to 150,000. We're not exactly sure yet. Jeff is going to help us with some of that math and numbers. But that doesn't mean everyone will get the maximum. It's up to that amount. So it's more about making sure people don't pay more than 25% or 30%. We haven't decided exactly which percentage we're going to use of their income every month on their housing costs. So that includes their mortgage, that includes their projected utilities and tax and insurance. And that is the goal of, again, that's the concept of housing cost burden. So there are some people who are paying 50%, 60%, 70% of their income on housing, and they don't have money to buy food. They don't have money to buy medicine or like do like these other important things for their life. So our goal is to give people the subsidy based off their income. So people who have lower income will get more subsidy so that it is only 25 to 30% of their income going toward their housing costs. So that's kind of, and it'll kind of be determined by the maximum income. And that'll tell people, okay, you can shop for a house up to $200,000 because you're going to get $150,000 in subsidy and you can qualify for a mortgage for $50,000. Like you could afford to pay a $50,000 mortgage note. So that's kind of, and again, it'll be individualized. Like, okay, once you get approved through the process, it'll be like, as long as there's funds available, you'll get some kind of letter saying, hey, congratulations, you are qualified to go shop for a house now. And this is the maximum price of a house that you can purchase through the CLT program. And so if it's first come, first serve, it'll just be based off the order that people actually like make a purchase offer to a home. It's accepted, do the inspections like normal, and then move to closing. So it'll just be based off of when people are able to move forward, confirming that closing. on the house. And if another option is lottery, so if that, for instance, there were 1,000 people who all qualified at the same, and we wanted to like do some kind of, we could also do a lottery. Okay, we're gonna like 20 people out of this 1,000 are gonna get the like randomly selected to get the green light to go shop for a house. So it's kind of hard to say which is gonna make the most sense for the program.
And you are accepting suggestions.
Yeah, if you have any suggestions, please.
Okay, I would suggest some, like maybe a handful or a percentage be random, and
Yeah.
or lottery, as you said, and then the rest be as you as I got the impression you were saying before, maybe not even during this call, but um kind of voting on. Thought that came up before.
Yeah, and in terms of voting, I don't know if there's going to be necessarily a voting process because what I was saying was first come, first serve. And and I'll tell you the pros and cons of that versus lottery. One is around like fair housing and like discrimination. So first come, first serve, it's just the first person who finds the house and finishes the process. You could argue, okay, if it depends on how you do your outreach though. So if the most higher income or communities that usually have access, whether that's like predominantly white communities or other privileged groups that might hear about these things, hear about them first, then you could say, oh, they have an advantage. But if our outreach is really focused on the communities that we want to serve through this program, then again, you could say that like, okay, we are first come, first serve might work great for reaching the right communities that we want to reach. So the lottery would make it totally random. But one of the disadvantages is like it might make sense if you had 10 houses to do a lottery for those 10 houses if you had 100 people. But if you're doing like this home buyer choice program, like housing is people are ready at different times, and somebody might take 6 months to get ready and get the credit right and get their income and debts, income like pay off debts. So it like might slow down the process of being able to buy a house. So if you have a house that you want to buy that's on sale and you need to wait like 2 months to be in the lottery, it may not work as well sometimes. So I think there are pros and cons. Aprili, do you want to share what you think are the pros of, you had suggested doing a little bit of both. What do you see as what you liked about the lottery?
Oh, well, I know that you said first come, first serve basis during this call. I thought I heard before in another conversation like voting. But yeah, I think that when there's a bit of randomness there, like bias can be kind of taken out of the equation a bit. I think that there could be like a bit of both because of the fact that, just what you said, there are pros and cons to both. And so I would not ever, if given the chance, I would not just go one way. But in terms of first come, first served, I think that people who are, like you said, you can do the outreach to targeted communities or things of that sort, and still the people who get a hold of this information and kind of grasp onto it could be the more resourceful people, could be the more, all these things, more abled people, right? Because people who are just able to reach those resources, and of course that goes back to resourcefulness. So I guess I am just happy and appreciative to hear what you said in terms of the pros and cons. And I think that there are a lot of pros in first come, first serve basis because of, like you said, people being like ready, working towards that, prioritizing it, in need, desperate at times, truly just needing to be served first. So I think that it's great to have a little bit of both for that reason.
Thank you, Aprilli. Well said.
Thanks.
Anyone else want to weigh in too?
Yeah, I'd just say, I think historically, my experience has been CLTs really did depend on resident selection committees. And that's the one that you're seen to be moving past. And I think for very understandable, strong reasons, and maybe being a citywide CLT is part of that too. But I think it would be good to talk to some CLTs that are still using resident selection committees to review a pool of applications. And think and talk to them about why they think that's a good way to do it. I suspect part of it is that they really want to find people who not only understand what they're getting into, but are really excited about owning a property through a community land trust. And not that they're just willing to sort of put up with the less return, but they're really interested in the governance of it, because third of your board is going to be elected by those people and are going to come from those lessee representatives. And so you do want a committed group. And that may be actually more true for a land trust where these folks will never see each other, because it is very unlikely you're going to have people living within a mile of each other. And that's unusual for a community land trust, at least historically. It's not that they're all in this tiny little neighborhood. It's just that even when they do scattered site, the folks they're within easy driving distance of each other. And if you're doing all of Marion County, that's a lot. And especially early on, it's very unlikely you're going to be having any concentration of folks. So it's just something to think about. But I do understand that the waiting list is absolutely seems to have a lot of equity reasons, a lot of things. It is more like a Section 8 program or government program, just straight up waiting list. And then, mixing in lottery, Aprilli's idea is kind of like, it just kind of makes it a little more fun. The idea that somebody might jump the line and without making everybody else mad, because it's maybe a small percentage of the folks who get in that way. But it kind of like, well, we're just gonna have some folks jump the line once in a while through a lottery.
When I think about it, though, one of the things I think of is who you're trying to serve and is there diversity. So to me, it doesn't matter whether it's first come, first serve or the lottery. If you're not, I guess, intentional about making sure there is diversity in who you're trying to serve, it could very well be skewed to, one group of being served. So like Aprilli said, like say, if you say first come, first serve, and then there's a population that say is more aggressive, then they may be the ones that are getting all of the funding. So regardless as to which method you choose, I think you need to be looking at, like if we say we're serving Marion County, but then at some point I know we had said there were some neighborhoods we wanted to prioritize. Are there people from those communities in there receiving, mortgages for home ownership via the CLT? So I think you have to also look at, whether it's a selection committee, whether it's first come, first serve, or whether it's a lottery, do you have that intentionality in the context of who it is you want to serve and who's crossing the finish line? And I think, Alvin, when you worked with in 10 Indiana, one of the things they found is that a lot of times they needed assistance in crossing the finish line.
Thank you, Ms. Bombana. Yeah, and I think that, again, like the goal of the pilots is to see how it goes and make adjustments. So it might be that like we get like 2 weeks, 4 weeks into applications and we're like, oh, we want to try and collect data so we can know like how well are we reaching different and diverse communities.
Good luck to you guys.
Tim says good luck.
Thank you. Hey, I have a question with regard to funding. So say you're talking a first round in the pilots, are you getting, my only cognizance is like the grant that you had, you meaning Kepra, to put this together operationally with regard to, envisioning it, actually doing it, putting it on the board. That's what you got there. Now the question is your community funding mechanism. Are you going to get funds similarly to like what Habitat does? It seems to me they get some kind of community development funds from the government that they, get. And so where are y'all going to get this money?
Great question. And I would say we are definitely still figuring that out. And Jim can speak to other CLTs too, their general funding mechanisms. Currently, we have about $400,000 that was committed from the Indianapolis African American Quality of Life for the Homebuyer Choice Pilot. So we do have some funds committed. The city has also allocated, at least in the original budget line for the CLT, $1.1 million, which we hope to be able to get approved for CLT projects once we have more of the infrastructure up and running. But right now we have that $400,000 to get started. We hope to be able to raise other funds.
So you're going to go out to, so a translation from me, from what you said, is you're going to go out and seek philanthropic funding to increase the amount. Of course, you're not going to say no to any other opportunities in terms of thinking about if it fits for you, should they come your way. Yeah.
Jim, go ahead. I think you were going to add in.
Yeah, no, I'm just saying that even though the city is deciding who gets the money, most of the money they get for especially capital. So there's a difference between capital money and the operations money. So hopefully Alvin is going to stay with this in the future. But whoever it is, they will need to be paid for their time, and they will not be alone. So that's the operation money more than anything else, is the salary for the folks. But the capital is this subsidy, right? That's making it happen, and the subsidy that goes into that repair work that needs to be done. Really think that's really critically important that you have folks who've been there, done that with these home buyer choice programs. But typically, even though the city's giving the money, they're getting it from the federal government.
Right.
And the
So
home
it is
program,
like,
the home program by far has been the biggest source of funding for community land trust. It's been around since the early 90s. And it early on said we need to think about keeping these homes affordable for some time. And so community land trusts were right there when home was authorized back in the early 90s. And it's been by far the biggest source of funding for any CLT just about anywhere. And that's why I think so many CLTs do like Inglewood does, and they rehab or build their own homes. It's been exciting to see how Houston and Minneapolis are mixing it up with this home buyer choice program.
Yeah, and then another source in addition to home, and I think Indianapolis receives about $3 million of federal home funding per year from the HUD, Housing and Urban Development. There's also community development block grants, which could be used for subsidy. And then I think Indianapolis gets, I think it's like 7 to 10, somewhere in there, $1 million per year, which is an application funding round that they do every fall. So the CLT would apply like other affordable housing developers. Even if it's for a home buyer choice program, it would really be more like applying for money to either make mortgages or to provide the affordability, the buyer affordability down, kind of like down payment gap for the program. And then philanthropy. I think there have been some really major gifts from Jeff Bezos's ex, Mackenzie Scott, I think has given Houston CLT like $10 million. I think San Francisco CLT, 20 million. So private philanthropy, I think, as more attention goes toward the really crisis in affordable housing. I think both like non-local resources, but also local resources might turn toward it. Houston's major funding mechanism was also called like what we call here tax increment financing. There they call it TERS or whatever. But basically they got, I think, like 20 or 30 million, which allowed them to be able to do their first 300 homes, go from like 0 to 300 in like 3 or 4 years through that funding mechanism. And that's just like kind of like a local property tax funding mechanism that we do have here in Indianapolis too. It's a possibility.
That's good.
So we are at 7:03. So I will open up any last thoughts or questions or comments. All right. Well, thanks to all. We will see you again, hopefully, for our January meeting. We'll have more updates.
Yay. Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks, everybody. Have a
Thank
great.
you.
Hey, Alvin, can you hang on just a second? I want to just coordinate with you between now and January. If you could just hang on for
Yeah,
just a second.
problem. I'm gonna stop there for you.